Doug Zoy here once again, and this is the third part of my shop build series. So as you can see behind me, I'm starting to get some cells in there, so we're getting close. It won't be much longer. I'll put a link to the first part in the upper right hand corner. If you like what you see here, hit the like and subscribe button. I got more content coming, and thanks for watching. So I've been assembling these compression assemblies. Basically I got my rods here, and I put my back plate in with the pour-on on it, and this end doesn't have anything, but this one shows one together. I want to get it so I get all my plates tightened up and everything. This bar and this bar will come back out when I go to put my cells in. I have to set every rod to 593 millimeters. Some guy wrote it on up here on the door, so we know what it is. This side I got done. I have all my BMSs out and everything, so that way I can get access to the bolts real easy. These top ones here, you can get to them pretty easy with the BMS plate in, and this one here is no problem either. So basically when I get all these all in here, then I can start putting my negative bus bar back in, all my BMS plates and everything, and that'll finish that up. And then all I have left is put cells in, and then of course do balance leads and get everything hooked up. So anyway, I got two more here to do, plus get this one up finished, and then I can start putting the rest of it together. So later. I'll show you here how I put these together here. I've got my plate up against my post here. If you do it right, you should be able to slide your plate on in there. And then you have your rod here, and then you just slide it on back and get it on in there. Then you get your nut on it, and then you go put your nuts on the other end. So later. So on the end here, you can see these bolts here sticking out. Basically what happens when you tighten these up, then that'll give you your compression. So all I do is when I'm done here, I just push that all back, and my plate will be all ready to go on the other end, so I can put my cells in. So this one here is they're just sticking out. I haven't got the nuts on them yet. So anyway, later. So for my spacer here on my plate, so I keep it a 1/4 inch away from the wall, I'm just using a piece of PVC lattice here. I cut it off about 2.5 inches, and then I just put a piece of VHB tape on the back side. I just use a sheet there to hold it up, and then I can just slide it right on behind her and stick it to the back wall. That way it keeps my plate a 1/4 inch away from the wall. I'd mentioned that in a previous video that I wanted my plate a 1/4 inch away from the wall, and that's how I'll maintain that spacing later. So I got all my compression fixtures all sitting in here. They're ready to go. I got all my BMS plates back in, and also added this wire here coming off my Class T's. Of course, every surface there that is a mating surface was cleaned before I bolted together, and I did check every Class T, make sure all the terminals were tight, and I did find one Class T where the bolts were tight. So remember, you're your own quality control, so check everything. All right. I'm getting ready to put the cover back on the positive bus bar and get my negative bus bar back in, but it sure looks pretty in there. So later. So I got checking, and guess I never really covered the negative bus bar. Basically I got a piece of aluminum flat, runs all the way from the top down to the bottom. I just use a piece of angle to hold it to the top and down the bottom. I got 2 bolts in that angle, and that way it can't turn. Just put a single one up front. And of course stainless hardware, because you know we're dealing with aluminum. The bus bar itself, you know, is copper, and then I got a standoff here, and it holds it away, and I got my cover. Okay, these short little bus bars, the reason for those is the BMS is all here on the right hand side. The cables wouldn't have been long enough to reach, and I really didn't feel like, you know, combining them and extending them or whatever. So I just made a short little bus bar goes across there, and yeah, I know the connection ain't inside the trough, but whatever. Anyway, down here at the bottom, there's my 4/0 cable. Of course, it's halfway between, you know. And then I just got a clamp down there in the bottom of the floor. Walked over my aluminum pile and found that white piece of aluminum. Drilled a 1/4 inch hole on the one side, put another clamp on that, and 2 self-tappers into the post. Okay. There's not much more I can do on this side. I can't put any cells in or anything until I get it over the wall, and I got some wiring to do in the back yet. So for now, this is all done on this side. So it's ready to go. So later. So for running my PV wire here from my IMOs and then up to my inverter, I just put a piece of raceway here to the back wall. I use a self-tapping screw to hold it, and then I got some plastic caps go on there, and then we're 5/16 head, and I just bought an assortment like this off of Amazon. The one you need will be an M5x8. I fit a 5/16 head. So did the same thing on the AC output wires when I ran over to my combiner box. So later. So I'm running my AC output wires here on the left inverter, and what I did here is I just fastened another piece of wire way through there, and the same deal, self-tapping screws. Got a cover on them. Same thing I did with my PV wires, you know, I just showed that. There's the end there. On the other inverter, I had to go to the top. I used some VHP tape, fastened up there, and then on the top side, I got a stainless bolt holding it here on the bottom, and I got the little covers on the nuts on the bottom. The Class T over here, I moved out. You can see the old hole back there. Move that out, and that way I can get my wires in behind there for my AC input. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that later. All right. Still haven't got this negative cable done. I'm getting ready to get this done so that I can get my shunt in here. So later. So I got these all wired, and as you noticed, I have the heat shrink on it. Your ground wire only needs to be 8 gauge, and for the heat shrink, I just use a Rhino printer. The heat shrink size, I think, is 1/2 inch. Lithium Solar, he's another YouTuber out there. I watched one of his videos a long time ago, and that's what he was using, and I went ahead and bought one. First one I got actually was a dud, didn't work. Then they sent me this one, and man, I've used it a lot because, you know, I'm always printing labels for something. So I like labeling stuff, makes it nice. I got both hold down screws in there, and that's all ready to go. So I'm going to start running wire for AC input here, or my conduit for AC input later. So what I got here is a roll of FMC, flexible metal conduit. This is 1/2 inch. I used it, like doing my lights, you know, and stuff like that. It makes it pretty easy. You've got a, like here, the ceiling is ribbed, you know, and then you mount your lights, you know, you got to get around them ribs. So that works pretty good. Go from my junction box over to the light. To cut it, I'm just using my cutoff wheel here, and then I got a flat disc in the grinder, and I'll clean the end up with it, and then I'll take my utility knife and deburr it and make sure there are any burrs in it. And I'll show you how to install it next. So when you go to install it here, you have these little red bushings. You'll buy them in a bag like this, okay? And then you stick them here in the end of the FMC, and that's before you put your fittings on it. Now your fittings here for FMC, of course, are different. You can see the screws sitting here at a 45-degree angle, and that's to tighten against the ribs on the FMC, okay? So that's how I'm running my PV wire. It's coming here through the wall, and then I'll run it out of this box through the FMC and up here into the trough. I got two fittings right back there, and I'm just looping it around. I got some other conduits got to run through here underneath, so anyway, I'll make sure I got a big enough loop to it. Later. So I got my flex here all installed, and got it all wired here. Now when I wire this here, I make a little loop here, that way my wire heads into my conduit fitting straight, you know. It's all the little things that make a difference. This way it ain't rubbing on the top, you know, and chafing it, all right. When you go to pull your wire on through there, what I like to do is I take my lineman's pliers right there, and I'll bend that end over and flatten it out. And the reason for that is you're pushing that wire and feeding it on through here, it'll like to catch on them ribs or something, you know. But if you got that end rounded over, you can push it through there real easy. Now, it comes straight on up to the bottom. I drilled my holes so they were right in line with my conduit that goes up to my IMOs. You can get by here with 3/4 inch conduit. That's just fine for conduit fill. My ground runs up here to my wireway, and then I ran it right over here to my combiner box and put it on my grounding bus bar. Okay, on my IMOs here, okay, I label all my strings here. PV1, PV2, these are the ones that go over the inverters. This is for the left inverter, this is for the right inverter. Same thing, I got them wired to which MPPT they're going to. Okay, being I knew which strings they were, then I also put heat shrink on here. you'll need 3/8 for that 10 gauge wire. This is string 2, string 1, and string 3. And the reason why they're arranged that way is, okay, this is terminal 1, and these are all odd numbers up here, and these are all even. So this is terminal 1, and then it feeds to terminal 2. Notice it's red here, and it's red here. This is terminal 3, and that'll go to terminal 4, okay, and it's black, all right? And same thing here, this is 5, that goes to 6, 7 goes to 8, okay? A lot of people get messed up on that, but they always go diagonally, and the reason why is because of the way the switch is designed to break that action if you got to shut it off, okay? I got these all done, and I'm ready to put my covers back on here and on my metal box, and as far as that, I've got this part finished, so later. So you can see on my inverter there, more heat shrink, of course, you know, I label everything. I got my covers back on my IMOs, and I also did a lockout on them. That way nobody turns them on here, but the only guy working on it's me. But you do have the covers off here, so practice good safety practices and put a lockout on, okay? I did get my big switch here. This is my disconnect right here. And this will be going here on the end, and then I can get my negative battery cable. It's still hanging there. All right, later. So I got my generator interlock installed yesterday, and the night before I started moving stuff here. As a bench goes underneath this pallet rack, and this pallet rack got moved too, and then that's 12 years worth of cobwebs and dust and dirt all behind there, so that all got cleaned up, which is a good thing. So the 3/4 inch conduit there you see at the top string, that was already there. I put that in there 12 years ago for a welder outlet. That's for 60 amp, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to put a panel on the other end of it and use that, but I'll get to that later. Got 2 strings of 1.25 inch conduit, and this building just has girts on the inside, so that's why you got to see the uni strut. It runs in between the 2 girts, so I had something to fasten to. The box is in its final position, and I got to figure out how to get everything all hooked up here, so later. So I finished running the AC output conduit here. It runs up here on this side of the box, the side the cells will be on, but run up here along the window, and then I got a pull box up here. I'm sure it'll be fun pulling this through here. And I got 2 90s on this section, and the next section I have 2 more 90s. So basically I had to shim it out of here for that bracket, but no big deal. Make sure it cleared that copper air line. You know, you don't want anything steel touching that. And yeah, this is copper air line in here. And I put that line, I think I spent $4,500 in there about 12 years ago, 14 years ago. I'd hate to see what a copper air line would cost now. So anyway, I'll show you the other side here. So next. So I got a 125 amp box mounted there. That's going to be my AC input to my inverters. Basically, I got to mount a panel outside yet, and being it's winter here, unless we get a really nice day, and I can take the time down to do it. But anyway, I just used up some of the extra 1.25 inch conduit pieces I had laying around and run down to it. This copper air line, and it used to be a hose reel over here, and so I got to do some more plumbing work there, but it's staying. I'm not moving it. I'm gonna just put a connector there. Anyway, comes down, and then we're using a rigid connector, and then I got flex connectors on there. You can see my PV comes in there. I had that all hooked up. I showed that in another part, and then ran MC there. Okay, on this end here we got inch conduit running underneath the trough. And then I use a reducing bushing and another rigid connector and just use the 90s there. Underneath here I got an LB mounted here on this side. And an LB mounted here. What that'll allow is me to run my AC wire straight on up into my conduit, which is right up there, see. The switch is mounted at 600 amp. Somebody shared that on a do-it-yourself solar forum. And I got to make the one final connection here between the shunt and the switch. I ran out of terminals. Yeah, you know how it goes. So anyway, other than that, that's all ready to go. I'm mounting my 48 volt bulb here for my pre-charge. Instead of a pre-charge resistor, I'm just using a light bulb. And I gotta do a knockout down here, and then I'll pick a piece of plexiglass and glue that up in there. That way I can see when the light goes out. So Yeah, and I need a switch for it too. That's coming. So anyway, this part's pretty well done. Wires pulled here, the 125 amp panel for my combiner, and I'm getting ready to put the cover on. And as you can see here, I just ran the conduit up, put a 90 there, made a couple of nice little brackets so I could clear the inverter if I ever want to pull it off or have to. Another rigid coupler there, and then ran flex over to my pull box, and I'm glad I did that because, you know, that's quite a bit to pull that 1 gauge wire, you know, it's pretty stiff. So anyway, this part's ready to go. I'll be starting to put battery cells in here pretty soon. I don't have any terminals for the balance leads. Something I overlooked. So these wires here, there's a box going to go on there, and that's for another video. So that'll be coming up. That'll be an interesting one. So anyway, later. So I didn't cover the reason for this second box for AC input. The reason why is you're going to run your 2 gauge or your 1 gauge over here, this panel. This is a 125 amp panel. And the reason why is your terminals, of course, in your inverter are only 6 gauge here, okay? And so you can only use 6 gauge wire is the biggest wire you can fit in there. So basically you're going to run your 2 gauge, 1 gauge over to here. And then I got a pair of 60 amp breakers, 1 for each inverter, and then I can run my 6 gauge over to my inverters, okay? Later. So in my house I have a manual transfer switch, but on this install I decided to do something a little different. Basically I'm going to use a generator interlock. I got a 125 amp backfed breaker here, and that has to have a hold down kit because of course it's a backfed breaker. And you got your 200 amp main here. Of course the purpose of your generator interlock is so you can't have both breakers on at the same time. Okay. Basically, what I'm going to do is install that panel outside, and it has pass-through lugs, and I'll show that here next. But anyway, your pass-through lugs will be attached to this breaker here, and that'll allow you to just switch to grid direct and bypass everything with the inverters. Then you have to install another 125 amp breaker in that panel, and of course that'll go to my 125 amp AC input breaker panel I just showed. Later. Okay, this here is a breaker panel I'm going to install on the outside of my wall. Basically the power will come in on these lugs here, and then these have a pass-through lug here. Of course, you know, you have an extra terminal up here for your neutral, okay? These 2 pass-through lugs here will be connected to my 200 amp breaker on my inside panel. So here's the part number here of that outside breaker. As you can see, you know, of course it's rated for NEMA 4 rated for outside, and of course it's rain proof, so it doesn't need to be very big. Basically you're just passing through power and only adding the 1 breaker panel to it. I probably won't get this one installed until spring. You know, it's winter here, and you know, I'd have to work under the roof and dripping water on me all the time, and I'm not interested in that. So later. So as you can see, I did finally get around to getting this box fastened down to the cement. If you notice here, that's where my line is for my radiant heat. And I use a thermal camera to do it. Somebody commented the other day on how they had trouble using the thermal camera. They were trying to locate studs in their camper. But the way you do it is, he said what happened is he put his hand in there, and then of course the heat from your hand throws everything off, you know. So anyway, I said, well, what I used was just a long rod, and this basically is just a old radio antenna off a vehicle or something. I don't know where it came from. But I would sit there and watch my thermal camera, and I could just see that rod, and then I'd put it where the center of the line was. Okay? You can do the same thing when you're looking for studs in a wall or anything when you want to fasten something. So anyway, just a little pointer there. So as I have these fastened down, currently I'm starting to install some cells. So until next time, catch some rays, and we'll see you later.